welcome back. I hope you had a good lunch. You could interact very well with your colleagues. You had some good discussions. As a kind of reminder this morning, obviously we've been talking a lot about social media, what has happening. It's becoming increasingly important. Also, it is very challenging, obviously, seeing all the regulations, especially for life sciences. So a lot of noise has literally been created. So I think the next topic is a very nice one, linking into that and really focusing on how can we reduce the noise which is created out there, and at the same time reduce also compliance risk when we are going to interact in a digital space with our HCPs. And I'm very happy to introduce to you Luke Rogers, who's the Senior Director, Business Partnerships at Within 3. So Luke,
great, thanks very much. Thanks for having me, Dirk. So today I'll be talking about reducing noise and compliance risk when it comes to your digital activities that you're performing. Been great presentations this morning, been very interesting to hear these. I'm coming from a different kind of perspective. I'm looking forward to sharing this with you. So Within 3, we are a best-in-class digital stakeholder engagement platform. So I'm coming more from the vendor provider side, but as a result, I have a lot of different perspectives from different clients across the industry and how they're actually approaching the digital, social, omni-channel space. Great. So first, I have a quiz. So if you could go to the polling icon, which is the top right of your screen, there's participants and polls. You go to polls. Guy, if you can make the first poll active, if it isn't already. And I'd like everybody to go there and answer this question. The question is, how challenging is it to demonstrate ROI from the social media and omni-channel activities you're undertaking? Is it 1, very challenging, 2, harder than we thought but we're getting there, or 3, under control? So I'd like to just get a feel of the room if we can and see what people are saying there. So go to the polls, top right. So if you close the poll, so 71% saying very challenging, struggling with it, to be honest, 22% saying harder than we thought, and very small percentage saying that it's actually under control. Okay, great. So Guy, if we could launch the second poll question, please, that would be great. And that one is, so what's kind of stopping you from generating ROI? Is it more external compliance factors, maybe industry guidelines and the whole no direct to patient, direct to consumer type communications? Is it internal compliance, more your internal policies, GDPR, that you can't capture or store the data, maybe more that the KOL customers aren't your final customers in a sense, or that as a business, we're just more reactive in our work. We can't proactively message about cancer diagnoses and things like that. So if you could go there, please, into the polling and select your response there, please. That would be great. And then click submit. Okay, great. Perfect. Thank you very much all for your responses. That'd be great. Great to see the kind of what's going on across the industry here. Cool. So now I'd like to put a scenario to you. So you've just had your little KPIs and roundtable. So when you sit at your internal cross-functional teams, your colleagues are talking revenue and NPS, your medical colleagues are talking share of voice and IIT and publications. So what KPIs are you actually quickly using to show ROI at the very top level, obviously? So if you go to in the participants function in the discussion box, you can type in your thoughts there. And there's email consents, views, time on site, unique users. Okay. Great. Okay, interesting. So I'm hearing from a lot of my clients that social media for pharma is a battlefield. You can't control the audience response, whether it's positive or negative. You can quickly lose control of the narrative. It can be expensive. The paid ads and sponsored campaigns you're running, all targeted at very specific customer profiles, and the more targeted, the more expensive they're going to be. They can be messy. You can never argue with a troll, is the saying. So no matter how positive your messaging, all it takes is that one person to write something, and now the message is lost. It can be time consuming because a lot of companies have that policy where you have to respond to every comment, even if it's negative, for due process. And somebody from your team has to do this. It could be risky. There could be poorly worded posts and responses. that could be perceived as promotional. If it's not compliant, then now there's a permanent record of it publicly available. And it can be numbing. Like the constantly positive, emotional, heartwarming content may start to lose impact or become heavy-handed. But I personally do still, well up with tears every time I see the small children seeing and hearing for the first time. So, but it's just so much of it, so it can be numbing after a time. So I'm hearing some of my clients that they're starting to pull back out of the social space because of things like this. And we know that the industry is kind of evolving from multi-channel to more omni-channel. And that's great in those kind of non-regulated industries. Everyone's using Amazon and so on as shining examples in this space. But obviously we're in a compliant space. There's obviously barriers to doing that about who is the final customer, the decision makers of be it budget, of clinical utilization. How is that actually working? So the customers, can often be hard to nail down. So obviously we're trying to shift towards an omni-channel direction. But when we do this, oftentimes, what are we creating? We're creating an engaged audience, but varying levels of relevance. We can have direct lines of communication for stakeholders, but your commercial and MSL teams may already have these. You may have complex tiers and matrices of messaging and avatars and customer profiles, but that same KOL who's a novice in pain may be an expert in oncology. Okay, so how do you balance these out? You may have an online presence to a massive audience, followers and so on, but you just may not have the ability to engage back. Your hands are often tied. And you may have a broader scope of market understanding, but again, lots of background noise. There's a lot of negatives, a lot of positives. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle, but it's just so hard to nail down. And you're creating noise and work, and you're really busy, but the KPIs we're talking about, and engagement rates, followers, things like this, how do we put a value to those? How do you compare those to your commercial and medical colleagues in terms of the value you're bringing to the table and the ROI your company is getting from your activities? A quick thing to just want to clarify is around key opinion leaders, and digital opinion leaders. So your key opinion leaders are your quote unquote gray hairs, your medical experts, your frequent Congress speakers, 20 or even 50 more publications in high impact journals, and may have zero presence in digital channels. And then you've got digital opinion leaders. Okay, so not always doctors, but and not always international experts. They might just be, for the Portuguese market, or in Porto, for example, only in Portugal. They typically do post frequently on digital platforms, social media, things like that, on obviously medical related topics. They're typically not promoting products. So think after their long shifts, you can imagine the wearing their masks and respirators, posting those exhausted photos. People like those can quickly become, those frontline digital opinion leaders. They're typically focused more on educating peers and sharing their message, sharing their journeys, and they may be patients and caregivers in doing so. Okay, so these are kind of what we're seeing as digital opinion leaders. And why is this important now? So because obviously the lack of getting face-to-face during COVID, digital opinion leaders have started to become a bit more prevalent. People are seeking out and curating that they want to follow certain experts who have credibility in their particular space, be they patients or physicians or KOLs, and able to people that they quote unquote trust. And now they're often just as influenced by those people and what they say, their recommendations, than they would as traditional KOLs. And they're in their normal social feeds that they see as well. And now you've created engagement. So what do you do with it? Okay, so let's say you have that omni-channel work going on. It's now really time to generate some meaningful, kind of actionable insights. And the concept of insights is something I'll touch on now. So it's defined from that your MSL, your medical teams define insights as discovery of a fundamental truth, or that aha moment, about your target customers that you can leverage for competitive advantage and drive growth. Great insights go beyond what healthcare practitioners and patients say and do, and even beyond their current behaviors and choices, and actually look at future choices, future attitudes, behaviors, market landscapes, things like this, future preferences. And again, this is what's being used by your internal medical colleagues. This is not something that's taken from another industry. This is what MSLs use. So what I'd recommend is we kind of reframe the mission statement that a lot of your teams are using, and because you just can't always transplant the same approach that you're using in FMCG and retail over into life sciences, as we know. So digital engagement teams, I think, should instead consider themselves more of a listening feeder function of insights to their colleagues internally in commercial, medical, clinical, and supply chain. So previously it was, let's start a buzz, or how can we go viral? Let's make a challenge that people start to follow and copy and post. And that's fine. But now it should be, I think, more, what can we learn? Who's clicked on what and why? And how can our teams really use this? Okay, so actually trying to bring more intent behind the work that's being done, as opposed to just creating a buzz. This distinction is important because instead of being thought as a standalone ROI generator, this team's function should now be thought of as part of a larger, more specific, more measurable function as a feeder of insights to other departments. So it's go from things like this, your omni-channel engagement, great. So you're now looking at this as maybe your basic research phase. You're trying to generate hypotheses, maybe get some inspiration around topics that people are trying to look at, identify digital opinion leaders, identify potential people that could be worth bringing offline and actually talking to and actually learning from as maybe advisors, as participants in roundtables, let's say, and now engaging in a more compliant space. In doing so, you're now coming from this, if you're engaging with digital opinion leaders on social media, that's all happening in a very uncontrolled space. What, just like in the art of war, fight battles on your own terrain of choice. This is what you can do, bring them into a very compliant space, which is confidential, invitation only, and actually do now applied research, where you're actually getting specific information around hypothesis testing, consensus building. You're doing them in small groups, 5, 10, 15. This could be patients, caregivers, because you can blind platforms like this, KOLs and nurses, payers, clinical purchasers, and purchasing teams. And participants can now work with the life sciences company and actually develop what the next steps would be. And there's consensus by design, it's kind of baked in, and you're creating the ability, the meta of it is you're creating the ability to listen to them specifically, then go and implement those things and come back and say, look, we've listened to you, these are the things we're doing now. And as a result, you get that upswell in engagement and trust that's out there. There's lots of different features you can do on platforms like this. They can be, again, very confidential, they're compliance gated. You can do pre-reads, public and private questions, so where they can actually see what everybody else is responding, or you can have them siloed from one another. Do data visualization, so you speed up that insights process. Even gated questions, branch questions too. So what we're doing is we're going from observation, so what's happening out there, what customers are saying and doing, and you're now kind of taking them into why, so why the customers did this. And this is that process of initially identifying and capturing topics and potential participants, and actually doing something with it now that's going to really bring a return on investment. And insights are going to lead you towards things like, and this is what your medical colleagues are trying to do as well, areas like maybe potential new therapeutic areas. And obviously you're generating these insights in partnership with your medical team or your commercial marketing teams too. Maybe it's new geographical markets you can tap into, better understanding of value relative to that stakeholder, be they hospital level versus departmental level versus individual level. More opportunities to engage more stakeholders who may be unknown and key to your go-to-market process. Maybe there's a decision maker that wasn't previously mapped out that you can actually identify in your work. There can be more opportunities to better target messaging at the various levels of stakeholders that you identify as well. You can identify these digital opinion leaders potentially that weren't already maybe in your CRMs, shall we say. You can identify education and knowledge gaps. If everybody's asking a certain question about a certain thing, that is an opportunity for you, obviously in concert with your internal teams, to actually fill those gaps in a compliant way. And these can all be quantified, measured, reported on, and drive your ROI evidence and justification. We all know that the team that brings return on investment will always have unlimited budget. So an example of insight generation is this, the virtual hybrid insight session. So what you're doing is it's a combination of live webinars. So that's good to have, that bit of face-to-face. It's great for good engagement, kind of breaking the ice and level setting. But webinars like this are only really good when one person is presenting. This type of platform that I'm on right now is not appropriate for receiving detailed insights from multiple stakeholders simultaneously. Okay, that's not how you use a platform like this. What you do use is overtime, these asynchronous platforms. And now this is where the real work is happening, where your advisors are sharing. You're able to have a much more productive effort and really elucidate what the important insights are going to be. And you achieve both things. You achieve compliance, so you have compliant engagement, but you also have maximum productivity from the effort that you're putting in. And the overtime platform, why would you bother with that? Because it does things like this. It's more inclusive than a single webinar where not everybody can be available. With this, there's no objection to availability. It's more considerate of their time because they can use it whenever is appropriate to them. It allows them to actually think about their answers instead of fighting for microphone time. Cross-language support, so one person can work in Portuguese, the second in Finnish, the third in Chinese, and it all harmonizes in the platform. Collaboration and co-authoring, so again, that consensus by design is baked in. It's all compliant and protected. Data comes to life through visualization tools. And it looks like this, there's a kickoff webcast, and now for 2 weeks, let's say, the Q&A is open and people are engaging whenever it's convenient for them. Maybe towards the end, there's another kind of next steps webcast, and then you've got a final deliverable kind of baked into the platform. If it's a treatment algorithm, if it's patient-facing materials, if it's a patient journey evolution type document, things like this, or evidence generation plans. But it's also really flexible. You can put pre-readings in and things like this too. So really easy to work around your specific requirements you're trying to do. And some examples of how this works. So we've had somewhere, the key opinion leaders were brought to us through digital teams and medical teams in concert. This is one around oncology, where there was 8 KOLs on 5 time zones. There's 24 questions asked to them, and they generated, I think, 87 pages of A4 transcript from their responses. So just a huge volume of insights to be mined. And the business impact was that the company now has a really informed strategy about clinical treatment pathway positioning and touch points for specific markets they didn't know before, which will actually directly impact the way that they actually come to the market. Okay, so this is actually really making a change to the way that they're going to launch a product. And this is an example of a treatment algorithm which was put to the advisors, and now they've come through and they said, look, this is a sticking point for us. This is an area where we need more education and so on. And now example for patients. So patients is actually really engaged when you bring them into spaces like this, where they're being asked questions, they feel like they're being heard, they do feel safe because of it as well. And this example generated, again, a huge volume of transcripts. They shared just so much information. And what this particular type of session generated is the information for future patients with metastatic breast cancer was basically refined, and also the way that they were informed about their diagnoses too was also refined at the clinical level. And the bonus level is that the patient digital opinion leader was used in this particular session as a moderator to create that, like, they're not in the fishbowl being looked at. It was more of a peer-to-peer engagement. And as a result, everyone was much more comfortable, stimulated heaps of engagement in the space, and they really took some insights out of this type of session. So some takeaways from my side is that social media, as you know, is fraught with compliance and reputational risk, and there's often more to be lost than won. Digital opinion leaders can be powerful allies, but engage them on your terms where you're happy with that. Ensure your omni-channel communications don't just create noise and buzz, but they actually do bring return on investment through meaningful insights, and measure and track those insights, because this will be important to your work. So what I want for you to be able to say your next discussion with management is, when they say digital team, what have you been up to this quarter? I want you to be able to say, so we've generated, we've identified 28 digital opinion leaders who weren't in our CRM, 16 are patients who are now being engaged in roundtables. We're getting insights. 12 are KOLs who we're running IITs with, and 2 we're actually going to create new sites who are going to take part in our upcoming clinical trial. Okay, and as a result, now you as a digital team have really brought meaningful, tangible insights to your company, and that will put you in good stead when you're compared against your colleagues there. Great, so that was all I had. So thanks very much for your attention, and happy to answer any questions.
And thank you very much, Luke, for your very insightful presentation. I think very organized and very structured. So a lot of things that will speak to the mind of people. Unfortunately, we do not have any time anymore for questions. I feel like we've been running a marathon, so we are only halfway. So with that, Luke, I really want to thank you, and people know how they can reach you, obviously. So
thank you, Doug.
And the people know by now how it goes. So back to the agenda and click on the next topic. Bye-bye, everyone. Take care.